And welcome back to Talks Within the Nine-Sided Circle with your hosts,
Nor Kyle and
Mushtaq Ali. And we are coming to you again from beautiful downtown planet Earth. And tonight we have a special guest, one of my oldest friends and an old student from back in the day, Cherie Blackwell, who has kindly joined us for the topic of discussion tonight. Cherie has been studying these things for a very, very long time, and I consider her an expert on the subject that we're going to discuss tonight. Probably knows a lot more than I do. And I make a rule of always getting the people who are smarter than me on things to talk whenever I can, because then I can look really good and not have to say anything. So say hello, Cherie.
Hello, everyone. Nice to be here.
And there you are. Yes, tonight we are going to be using speaker mode. So whoever speaks, their picture is going to be on the video. So be forewarned, if you are in your pajamas, you might want to really quick turn your camera off and put something better on. So the subject tonight is one that is very controversial. And that is desire, passion, and Eros. Y'all know Eros, right? The Greek god of love, physical, passionate love. It's a fancy way of saying sex. And this is part of the topic. Now, I'm going to start out by giving you an anthropological fact. For many, many years, anthropologists said that there is no universal rule, no universal societal rule about sex across societies. And this turned out to be false. It's just nobody noticed it for a long time. And the universal rule is sexual conduct shall not go unregulated. There is no society that we know of that has no regulations about sex, the use of sex, who can be with whom, or anything like that, even though it can be totally different. You know, in one society, you cannot marry your brother or sister. In another society, you must marry your brother or sister, especially if you're Pharaoh. But so far, civilization says there must be rules. Any idea why? Yes, Cherie.
Because it's the singular, most effective way to control people.
Yep, my notes say that right here. And that's the case. If you control the sexuality of a culture, you control the culture. It is the most powerful way to do it. It is more powerful than controlling any other emotion. It is more powerful than controlling money or capital or information or anything.
So
and
Nancy, finish your thought. Sorry, go for it. So Nancy says, meddling in other people's sex lives is more fun than not meddling in them. And yeah, some agree that may be true, actually. But in this case...
In this case, it's not really about fun.
Yeah.
Oh, no, it's about no fun most of the time. Now, so here you have this fact. Okay, let's look at what is sexual energy. When we talk about this, what is the energy of passion and life force? This is not a rhetorical question. Feel free to throw out your thoughts. And if you're wrong, we'll tell you. That won't be intimidating, will it? Kyle?
Let's see. I'm doing like 3 things at once. I'm sorry. What was the question?
What was the question? I forgot the question. That's how scary this is. When you start thinking about it, you start forgetting it.
Oh no.
My question is, what is sexual energy? Why would it be important to the work?
It's creative energy. It's motivational energy. Life force energy.
Yes. And in the building of the soul, it is the absolute fundamental building block. You cannot build your soul without this energy. Now, here's something that is very, very interesting. Of all the mammals on the planet, now, you've all heard about sex. It's very animalistic. You are giving in to your animal passions. You've all heard that, right? This is not true. This is the opposite of true. This is a lie. All mammals, with very, very few exceptions, their sex lives are totally regulated by the estrous cycle of the female. Yes. So, elephants. No elephant goes around having sex unless the female is in heat. No cat or dog goes around having sex unless the female is in heat. Of all of the species of mammals on the planet, there are only 3 that notably have sex for other than procreative reasons. Those are bonobos, one of our closest relatives in the ape family, dolphins, and humans. We're the only 3. I mean, yeah, there might be some shrew somewhere that does these sorts of things, or oh my God, Dr. Bill is here.
Welcome, Dr. Bill.
Dr. Bill.
Hey, sorry to be late, but I have a computer which is afflicting me with a very twitchy touchpad. And since I'm on the road tonight, I don't have access to a plug-in mouse.
Drat. That's okay.
Well,
Are you on the way back from Penzic?
No, I didn't go to Penzic this year, I'm afraid. Had enough travel in the beginning of the summer to take care of some oral surgical work at an absurdly lower rate in Luxembourg than could be had in the United States.
Funny how that works.
It's not the least bit funny, but I could lose my mind over that and we'd never talk about the fun stuff.
Yeah, and we are just getting into the fun stuff.
Well, permit me to crack my knuckles and wade right in.
All righty. So we are just talking about the idea that of all the species, very, very few have sex for other than reasons of procreation. And we know that the 3 species that are most notable for having sex that is not designed to procreate are bonobos, dolphins, and humans. And all 3 of these species use them for a number of different things, not the least of which is bonding. And I will suggest to you that we adopted this process of being able to be sexual throughout our entire lives, to be able to express this energy for the express purpose of being able to create conscience. Now, conscience is an interesting thing. Conscience is to the heart center as is consciousness to the head center. And even though conscience is a heart center function, it is not created without the energy from the sexual center. Why do you think this is? Let me repeat that. Conscience is created in the heart center. Conscience is one of the things that makes us actually human, perhaps the most important thing that makes us actually human. And it is not innate. It is developed. And you can see the development of conscience in any child that you watch. And it starts developing about the same time as their sexual awareness starts coming on. And so by the time they are out of their teens, they will tend to have at least some semblance of conscience, even though it may not be as good as we would like it to be. And you cannot create conscience without access to the energy of the sexual center. And without conscience, you are not human. There is a parallel hominid species that exist without conscience. I am convinced that they are the beginning of a divergent evolution. And one day we may have a fight with them like the Neanderthals. Any guess at what this species is?
Yes, sociopaths.
Yes, sociopaths, psychopaths, people with personality disorder, people who do not have conscience, like the guy in the White House. And I've come to the conclusion that they are a divergence from the main human, from the main Homo sapien stock. So rather than being Homo sapien sapien, I consider them Homo sapien psychopathia. You have to forgive my bad Greek, but I can't be coming up with these ideas and the words that describe them.
So Dave suggests Homo roboticus.
To a certain extent, but it's the roboticness of the psychopath is not the main function, is not the main feature of them. The main feature of a psychopath, sociopath, and everybody in that spectrum is the lack of conscience, the lack of ability to connect with the other as subject. You've heard me rant on this before. Don't get me started again.
That would be the root, literally, the root chakra for sexuality is being connected to development of conscience then.
Yes.
Connection to the other.
Yes. Without that sexual energy that bridges our connection with the other, we do not develop conscience. It is the sexual energy that allows us to perceive the other as subject.
Hopefully.
That sound you just heard were tons of Jesuits' minds melting down.
Yeah. But yeah, from a group of people who have stifled their own sexuality to the detriment of the church, I can use them as an argument in my favor.
Sin duda.
So,
Bushdock, I believe I cut Cherie off muttering.
Yes.
come back in, Cherie.
So what Mushak is describing would be in the best of all possible worlds.
Yes.
The problem is that the ability to actually have activated heart with the sexual energy is extremely rare. And
You ain't
the the social conditioning that he's describing begins even before we're born. So most people, and that includes people that are on spiritual paths, and I venture to say that especially people that are on spiritual paths, we exist inside of an almost impermeable shell of conditioning. And one of the things about spirituality or being on a spiritual path is that it can often mislead people into thinking that they're actually breaking through that shell. But on a very fundamental level, that barrier that we have between self and other will never actually dissolve except through the activation of sexual energy on a very high level. So essentially, we're all in a prison, and very few forms of sexual practice dissolve that.
Yes, it's true.
I mean, you can, people can, I can, you can pray, do sexual practices almost your whole life because of the fact, in part, that most religions have separated out sexuality from spirituality. You're never going to get to that place with just those practices, particularly in the established religions. There's really only one religion that I know of that has even addressed this in a serious way, and that's Tibetan Buddhism. One very small sect of Tibetan Buddhism, the Black Hat sect.
Yeah.
Other than that, and they follow a teaching of Buddha, where Buddha, in one of his enlightened states, turned to one of his friends and said, you know, I've just figured out nobody will ever actually get there unless we use our sexual energy. So it's deeply embedded in the Black Hat sect, and Buddha's diaries on this are quite illuminating.
Yeah, we were discussing that with a Tibetan manuscript that Kyle and I ran across. Where did we find that? Was that in that bookstore in LA? Yes, it was. Yeah, the last bookstore. We found it in the last bookstore. And it was the account of one of the Dakinis of Padma Shambhava and her.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Ah.
New person?
Yeah.
Yes,
And it's interesting in the Tibetan Black Hat sect point of view that the highest form of embodied enlightened godhood is a deity called Shittamati Tara, who is believed to have actually been built from the enlightened sexual energy of all enlightened beings.
Mm.
And she is able to embody a wisdom in a very particular way that helps dissolve that barrier.
Yeah, there is one other group that they're very close to the Tibetans, and that is one branch of Kashmiri Shivaism, the Abhasya Trika sect, the non-dual Trika sect. One branch of them have the same view, and I'm going to quote later from one of their works.
Sure. Yeah, Ilmar was suggesting, wouldn't the Hindu counter tradition, Kashmiri tradition, also be working in this area effectively?
Yeah. So there you go. Yes.
Yeah.
We share another thing in common, which is we are two of very few Americans who actually had a chance to spend time in Kashmir in our wild and misspent youths.
Yes. Actually lived in Kashmir for quite a while.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. So a comment from Aaron says, seems the barrier is reinforced from all varieties of conditioning.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now,
And
yes, go ahead.
we have a thought from Nancy as well, if you want me to.
Yes, please.
Okay, so Nancy says, I disagree with both of your premises. I think people have empathy before adolescence. In their and therefore have conscience, which has a large component of following the rules.
Oh, excuse me. No, that wasn't the therefore. That was a different thought.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
There was a typo involved.
Sure. Would you like to correct me? And
No. Oh, yeah. What I meant to say was, and there are people who seem to have consciousness that have a large component of following rules rather than empathy.
okay. And
Yeah, and I would say following rules has nothing to do with conscience.
Okay.
And I would say that if you think that children have conscience, you have not spent a lot of time with prepubescent children.
I had occasional fits of conscience when I was young.
Yeah,
or even spent much time in a contemporary primary school classroom.
yeah. Yeah, children are born sociopaths. That's their job. They don't survive unless they have that sociopathic tendency. The thing is, we're supposed to grow out of it. And we are supposed to grow out of it by the time that we get dangerous.
Mm.
And I mean, I would like to think that there are some non-sociopathic children out there, children who have empathy when they are 4 or 5 or 6 years old, but I myself personally have never experienced it.
children with empathy, or
Children with real empathy. I've experienced children who can fake empathy really well, but that's different than having it.
The really tricky part about all of this is that you can intellectualize it forever, but this form of conditioning is embedded so deeply in us that it doesn't exist on a conscious level. So you can even fool yourself into thinking that you've broken through this when you actually haven't. The only way to break through it is to experience intense states of heightened energy and be willing to endure a lot of pain. Because when that shell starts to unwrap itself, a lot of our assumptions and basic structures upon which we think that we have built ourselves start to dissolve. And it's scary, and the demand for extreme vulnerability is something that most people simply are not up to the task of being able to handle. So this is one of the reasons why it's so controversial, not only because organized religion and governments, and even smaller structures than that, families or even the inside of your own head, want to regulate this. It's because it's quite challenging to actually work with it. It's not impossible, but it takes a great deal of determination.
Yep. And if you want to have a fully grown soul, you need to. You don't have to have a fully grown soul, but if you would like to have one, this is essential to the path. Now, why does this happen? One reason is that all of your centers steal energy from the sexual center. All of them. They all want that energy, and you will give it to them because it's addictive. So when you find yourself having a mental sexual fantasy, that is most likely your head center stealing the energy of your moving center. If you are having not feelings, but emotions towards somebody, that is your heart center stealing from your sexual center. And this is like massively wrong use of energy. This is like pouring kerosene into, or it's actually like pouring rocket fuel into a Model T Ford.
Dr. Bill says, interesting parallelism to the healing of chronic wounds.
I would bet. Say something more about that, if you would.
Good, because I can say it faster than I can type it. In my current joint as a wound care specialist, one of the things we tell pretty much everybody walking in the door is that your baseline body physiology will use every bit of extra protein it's got to do absolutely everything else, and then it'll get around to healing wounds. To the point that if you have about a 2 by 2 inch chronic wound on your forearm or on your leg, the extra protein demand is about the same as doing 3 moderate arm days at the gym. But unlike weightlifting, it doesn't have a palpable sense of demand. You just don't heal. So we say 50 extra grams of protein a day. And there are study after study after study that demonstrates that theft, if you like. The protein's in there, body just could care less.
That is a scarily apt analogy.
Well, I love it when reality comes together.
Yeah. Aaron had a comment here.
He did. He said, hyper-competitive sexual situations seem to increase the dysfunction between the centers.
Oh, yes.
You know, I agree with everything that Mushtaq has said. There's another twist to the idea that only 3 mammals share this ability or this relationship with the energy.
Mm-hmm.
And
Approximately.
that is, don't pat yourself on the back too much about that, because most human sexual behavior is entirely primate DNA driven.
Yeah, and it is, for the most part, entirely mechanical.
And that's one of the reasons why the competition creates such chaos, is because if you look at the behavior of primates and see how they behave, we do exactly the same thing. Yep. Women tend to model a little bit more on the bonobo side, some male humans more on the gorilla DNA, but mostly male and female, predominantly chimpanzee behavior.
Yeah,
if you can go online and you can Google and you can read about how chimpanzees relate in their mating practices, and read about the bonobos and the gorillas, and you will see the similarities. I mean, even something as simple as how men and women come on to each other, like in a bar, in a brew pub, and a woman walks in the door and she locks eyes with a guy across the room and she starts swaying her hips and walking over and tossing her heads. That is exactly what the lower primate females do when they're trying to catch attention. We model their behavior. We're built on that. Well, we're not entirely built on ape DNA, but we do have a common ancestor. Yeah. And there's a lot of algorithms that remain the same, particularly in the mating practices.
Yep. Well, when it comes to where we fit in the tree of life, we are the 5th ape, basically. People don't like to think about that, but you know, you've got your primates like chimpanzees, bonobos, gorillas, gibbons, orangutans, and humans, all of whom fall into the ape family. And so, yes, we do show a lot of behavior that is very closely related to other primate behavior, and it tends to be very, very mechanical. One of the most common expressions of this is jealousy. Jealousy is what you get in chimps all the time. And it expresses itself in our behavior as well. And it's one of the things that jealousy is created when the heart and head centers are stealing all of the sexual energy that they can get and then wanting more. And the only way they can get more is to create very mechanical sexual situations where they control access to a partner. So let's talk for a second about the centers.
We have some
Okay,
questions.
Take that first. Yeah, this is why I listened to Kyle. So
I mean, someone's got to check the chat, right? Okay,
yeah.
so Mr. Kim says, what is the sign of energy being stolen from the sexual center?
One of the signs for it is, for instance, spending a lot of time in mental fantasies, or spending a lot of time in emotional turmoils, or spending a lot of time in attempting to control the sexuality of another person. All of these are signs that the sexual energy is being stolen from the sexual center by the other centers.
Okay.
It might be interesting to hear some descriptions of what it's like when that isn't happening.
Sure. Yeah. Let's contrast it with that, shall we?
Yeah. Give us an example, Cherie.
So if you can imagine a state where you feel completely at one with everyone around you, and you feel yourself elevating into a higher and higher state of consciousness, where things start appearing quite sublime, where parts of yourself you can look down on and notice and say, wow, I just don't need that anymore. In other words, a state of pure enlightenment, where you have extremely high perceptions of how the universe is structured, the meaning of life, what your role is in it, and at the same time, incredible states of joy and peace and ecstasy. In other words, the kind of state that most people don't even approach unless they take a psychoactive substance, but yet vastly beyond any psychoactive substance in terms of the quality and the profound nature of it.
Yep. You will also experience that when you are with someone someone who is beloved to you, and all you do is connect with them. You can connect with them at any of the levels, but it is without any baggage at all.
Yeah. And another thing too is that even our vocabulary, particularly in the English language that we have to use to talk about these things, is going to confine us.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, even if you use the word sex, there is already a whole bunch of presuppositions about what that means and what that doesn't mean. But these higher states of connection and higher states of connection to that energy can occur between people who are sitting 12 feet away from each other.
Yep.
In other words, a wise man once said to me, in heightened states of spiritual awakening, we share more sexual energy with each other in one breath than most people think that they do in a lifetime.
Mm.
But we are also sharing that energy with everyone else on the planet all the time. So for people that think that they're hiding from it because they're on a spiritual path, or that have just a whole lot of rules about how it's working, you're having sex with everyone in the world. You're having sex with everyone in the mall that you walk through. You can't walk down the street and not share this energy with everyone around you. It's just one state of it. And there's higher and lower states. So the whole idea that religious structures and political structures and family structures and the structures inside of your own head are controlling this is really quite ludicrous.
True.
Because the energy is so powerful, it can't actually be controlled. But what is being controlled is your awareness of it and your consciousness of it and your attitude about it.
So that thing about words, it's true. So I tend to use a Central Asian word to describe this energy, and that word is khat. It's also pronounced sometimes khat, and it comes out of the Turkish languages, and it means floor or root, or ground upon which you stand. And so I'm introducing this word to you all so I can talk about the khat energy, or the energy coming from the khat. Now, there are some people who wish that they knew more, who associate this with the idea of the dantian or the hara, and this is wrong. The khat is not the dantian, it is not the hara, it is literally the pelvic floor. The closest thing that we find in Chinese cosmology is the huyin point, which is the acupuncture point at the very base of the conception vessel, which is the vessel that runs straight up the body. And it originates in the perineum. And interestingly, that's you needle that for sexual dysfunction, amongst other things. So the huyin point is more analogous to the khat than anything else. And so I will say to you that sexual energy can either enslave or liberate. And the key is conscience. And here's where we get to one of the classic texts of Kashmiri Shivaism, which is the Spanda Karika. This is my own translation of it from the Sanskrit. And I'm just going to read to you two paragraphs that are non-contiguous but fit together. Spanda is the universal vibration. Spanda means to throb or vibrate. And it is the energy that was released at the moment of creation and permeates the entire universe at all times. And karika means a short dissertation in poetic form. So this is from a short dissertation that supposedly came directly from Shiva and was dictated to Vasugupta, the great Kashmiri sage who wrote it down. And it says, the spanda, the universal vibration, which is made out of sexual energy, it's made out of orgasmic energy, it's the khat energy. The spanda that manifests starting with the gunas, and I'll tell you about gunas in a second, tend to veil their true nature. In so doing, they push people of unawakened consciousness into the cycles of samsaric existence, from which it is difficult to extricate them. The energy of the universal vibration within the unawakened person enslaves him, whereas the same energy liberates the yogi. So there you have it, folks. You heard it first from Lord Shiva, who said this over 2,000 years ago. And we're still working on it. So what he's talking about with a guna, the word guna means strand or fiber, as in like a rope, the strands of a rope. And they twist together to create the reality that we experience. And there are three. And this is the yogic conception of the three forces. The three are sattva, rajas, and tamas. Yes. And sattvas would be the reconciling force. Rajas is the active or affirming force. Tamas is the passive and denying force. Now, in more recent times, people have put moralistic levels to this, like sattva is good and tamas is bad. And none of this is true. It takes all three to make a universe. So tamas is the force of entropy. It's the force of solidity. It's the force of energy slowing down to create matter. That must be David again. Poor David, he's having such a hard time. Rajas is the active force. That's the force of energy itself. Much faster moving. And sattva is the reconciling force, and that is the fastest of all. And that is the force that balances the other two. So ignore the moralistic aspects of the gunas and just think of them that way for me for the moment. You can go back to moralizing later. So any questions on this so far? Thoughts, questions? Somebody talk to me.
Right. Well, I'll just redouble on my amusement, for lack of a better word, that anybody would ever mistake khat for hara. Haven't they thrown anybody?
Usually not, actually.
It's not shocking.
Yeah. Or all they've ever done is throw somebody. Get the same problem.
Do you guys want to say more about that?
I will say that one of my first Silat teachers, he said to me once, we were in the dojo. I use the term dojo, even though that's not the right word for it. We were in his studio, and he had just finished, and he was like 70 at the time, and he had just finished tossing me across the length of the dojo. You know, I'm flying through the air going, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, this is gonna hurt, this is gonna hurt, wham! And the amazing thing was I could not tell how he did it. You know, usually if somebody throws you, you know, oh, he pushed here, he pulled there, he applied this force to this part of my body and unbalanced me. And I couldn't do that with this. I had no clue. So I said, Guru, how did you do that? And he said, you know how those Japanese people talk about belly energy and that's where all of your power comes from? And I said, yeah, I've heard this. And he said, this is not true. All of your energy comes from down here. And he pointed between his legs. And he said, that point right there is the origin of all of your energy. And when you learn to move from that, then you can really move. Until then, you're faking it. So, and I'm pretty sure he was right because, you know, at an age where a lot of people are just sitting in their rocking chairs thinking about the past, he was throwing people like me all over the place on a daily basis. And it wasn't from muscular strength because he didn't have that much. It was from something else. Now, the something else has lots of names, and we don't need to go into that right now, but there is a something else.
Agreed. And remind me to come back in private conversations sometime about why I think hara is part of the equation, even if it's not the source.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, hara is like a step up. So, no worries, Cherie. I am really happy that you were able to make it tonight. I had my fingers crossed. Cherie has to take off at 8 p.m. sharp.
Do you have anything else you'd like to share before you have to take off?
Oh, So few people actually really understand this thing. You're all very fortunate to have someone like Mushtaq. Um, and there are a lot of reasons why. There's also a lot of people out on there that you can find on the internet right now that absolutely do not know what they're doing.
And they will do that
So
to
I
you.
would caution you that if you want to run out and grab a tantric workshop or something like that, I couldn't say that there's anyone that I'm aware of that is competent at this point in time. It's our American propensity to graft things from other systems and pull parts out of things and innovate and change it and all that kind of stuff. In this particular area is quite egregious at this point. And I know people that have spent really a lot of money, and what they've got was either really misleading or just absolutely worthless.
Yeah, Dr. Bill says it's a pandemic.
Yep.
It is a pandemic, and one of the reasons for that is that even though we've gone through the era of fear because of the HIV epidemic, and there is what's kind of like a media assumption that people have just buried all this stuff and all the hippies are gone now, so people don't think about it anymore. It's quite the opposite. So and what Mushtaq said about the splitting of the primates, the higher primates, into two species, isn't just something that he's thinking about. Scientists and in the medical field have already discovered that this, in fact, is true. They're discovering people with brain structures and DNA patterns that are completely different from Homo sapien. So one of my interests in pursuing this area at this point in time is that we absolutely need modalities that will help people attain true states of empathy. And I agree with Mushtaq that at some point in time in the near future, the conscious sentient being.
Oh, goodness.
She froze.
No.
Well, we don't know if she'll be back, but I will tell you that she is in the forum, and that's a good place to get in touch with her. She's one of the smartest people I know. She's incredibly competent, and she is both, she's been she's an attorney to multi-billion-dollar corporations and a phenomenal artist and fiber artist and photographer and all of these things. And one of my favorite people for decades and decades. So strike up a conversation with her. See if you can get her to talk.
Yeah, I mean, I know she's off now, but I just want to say, for the sake of the recording, that we are really grateful that she was able to be here and contribute in such a huge way to this discussion.
Yeah, so the idea of developing conscience and empathy is utterly essential to the work. Without it, you do not progress. The most powerful way to do that is in relationship of some sort or another. And it should be a relationship where this energy is exchanged. This relationship has to be conscious, non-coercive, and it doesn't have to be overtly sexual, but it don't hurt.
It's probably her.
Yeah, that was her sending me a message, I'm sure. Yep. Yeah, her internet connection completely failed. She lives in one of the most technologically savvy places on the planet and can't get good internet. Go figure.
The universe was keeping its secrets.
Very likely.
That thought did cross my mind.
So, any questions? Any thoughts? Y'all have been so quiet.
I want to double back a little. We've been talking about the problems inherent with language and how it builds control structures around this particular topic. And two thoughts occurred to me. One, it seems like it's all of a piece, that the control structures aren't just around this aspect of living, but just in toto. And I don't know that one, I don't know that one facet of the structures of not thinking and the structures of control are any stronger than the other. It seems to me like they look really, really strong until you tap the wall in the right place, and then everything comes apart because they're so not real, not true, not grounded in that which is. The second thought I had was that at some level, I think one of the problems is there is an experiential component to this. And I think you can fertilize the soil. I think you can give people language that gets as little in the way as possible. But at some point, you got to hand them the chocolate.
Mm-hmm.
They got to taste the chocolate. And then they can come back and say, oh, this is chocolate. And then you can start to have a discourse.
Yep, it's true. And the thing is, you can't hand them the chocolate. They have to pick it up for themselves.
Mm.
You put the chocolate down on the table and say, there's chocolate, but you can't put it in their hand.
Nice expansion. I like that.
It's all part of that non-coercion thing, right?
Yep.
The conscious choice to reach out for it.
Yeah. And the coercive sexuality that the human race has adopted over the last 5,000 or 6,000 years is the biggest detriment to human development that I know of.
Nancy says, part of the control structure. Maybe most of it is how good people are allowed to feel.
Yep.
Yeah, I guess I'm somewhat, I don't know, I find myself not so much trouble, but I'm not quite sure what to do with this discussion. Obviously I need to chew on it to see where this leads to, but I don't. There's something I'm failing to grasp here, I guess. But so let me just try to do something simple about this. You're saying, if I understand you correctly, that development of conscience is critical to development as a person in your tradition.
Yes.
And you're saying that relationships are the primary cauldron, so to speak, in which this consciousness develops, right?
Yes.
Right. So, and the claim that you're making also, I guess, is that it's this sexual energy that is the energy in those relationships. And I guess I'm trying to understand that, really. Because, I mean, for example, I mean, I feel I have a certain relationship to you, okay? I feel no particular sexual overtones to that relationship.
No, and you
So
would.
is it just a linguistic thing that we're saying both what's going between you and I and what's going on, between me and my bedmate, let's say, is the same energy? I mean, what makes it the same energy?
It is the energy of connection. You and I have connected on some pretty profound levels.
Right, and I felt absolutely no sexual charge today.
No, but it's the same energy. See, that's the problem with using the word sex.
Okay.
Because when we say sex, we think of fit tab A in slot B.
Right.
And it's not that. This is the energy that allows people to connect. The most profound connection that you can experience is with another person that includes that.
Right.
And I should say at this juncture that as far as I can tell, your sexual preference is irrelevant to this. As a matter of fact, one of the ways that society controls people is they go, oh, gay people are bad, so nobody have gay sex. Or interracial sex is bad, so nobody have that. You know, all of these rules about who can sleep with whom.
Okay, but let's just push at it a bit here. I mean, so you're saying essentially that it's, okay, there are many ways in which people connect with each other.
Yeah.
Right? From being in bed with each other to singing in the same choir to fencing in your case. Now, why do we need to assume that it's the same energy that's operating in each of those areas? I guess that's the part I'm not getting.
Because it is energy that creates something that no other energy does. I will give you an example.
Please.
So years ago, I had a commercial CLOT school. And there were 5 teachers there, one of whom was this incredibly delightful woman. And she and I were about at the same level. And oftentimes after class, we would spar. And probably around the 3rd time that we did, this thing happened where we connected into the flow of the fight. And this went on for who knows how long. I have no sense, I lost all sense of time. It was just this flow back and forth of energy that was, it turned out to be incredibly erotic for both of us. And connected us on an incredibly profound level. And at the same time, there was never any overt sexual contact between either of us. She had a boyfriend, I had a girlfriend. Yeah, that was not in the cards. But, you know, after the first time that happened, you know, we stopped and we were like catching our breath. And she looked at me and said, "Was that good for you too?"
Hang on.
Was yes.
Now that may, I mean, that indicates to me, because I've closest thing I have to experiencing that is some of the stuff that goes on with me with 1 or 2 tango partners. You know,
Yeah,
sometimes
and
happens
that would be analogous.
and that makes it a beautiful experience. So now, why do I need to go from, well, and it does, okay, and I can see where it's the similarity of energies there. I can see that, okay. So if so let's say I'm playing chess with somebody. I'm having a connection with them. If it's not one of these flow energy states, is that then a different?
I don't know,
Okay.
because I have never had that experience playing chess with anybody.
Okay. I mean, I guess my point is that it seems like we connect in lots of different ways with people, and in some of those types of connections, it seems to make sense to me to say it's similar to this.
Here's the difference. In the experience that I described, at the end of it, my empathy towards this person had deepened profoundly.
Okay.
And it stayed deep. You know, the last time we bumped into each other, it was still there, and it was still there for both of us. And there was still this connection that happened at a very deep level. And that's the difference. That's when you are using this energy. And you might not find that in other forms of connection, but you will find that in this form of connection.
Mm.
That's what I'm talking about, is this form of connection.
Okay. So if I understand you correctly, it's the type of connection which creates empathy, which is pulling on this energy. But
Yeah.
other types of connection between people that don't necessarily create empathy might be using a completely different energy. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that could be. Yeah,
Okay.
I haven't researched that all that much because I'm mostly interested in the kind of energy that creates empathy.
Okay, got it. All right, that's getting it clearer to me now. Thank you.
Can I come at it sideways a little bit as well?
Okay.
Go for it.
We are all stuck in our meat suits.
Mm-hmm.
And intrinsically, that sense we all have that comes out in the old truism, the old dad joke, that at the end of the day, when you close your eyes, the last person you're there with is the person behind the eyelids.
Mm-hmm.
It is extraordinarily difficult, I think, and most of human history seems to suggest, it is extraordinarily difficult to engage the notion of the other as subject because all the cards are stacked against you. Your experience of reality in any way, shape, or form is mediated.
Mm-hmm.
It is mediated in an instrument which is really prone to biochemical distortions. Talk to me sometime about my temper when I was in chemotherapy. Yucko.
Yeah, I remember you getting grumpy once or twice.
Yeah, once or 2,000 times. I think it is possible that the connection Mushtaq postulates between developing a conscience. And once you develop it, you've got it. And if you have connections with other people, it maintains. But I think the connection with development is that with sexual energy, this is the best shot you've got to get out of your own meat suit endoneurochemically. The body is aligned, the energy is aligned. We know that there are changes in emission of subtle second chemical messengers and pheromones between people who have been intimate in sexual contact. So is it going to work all the time? No, for all the reasons that were adduced by many of us earlier in the discussion. But it's the hinge point as an adolescence. If this happens to you, you have the best possible shot at reaching out of your own containment, literally, and touching the other as subject. It's a facilitator. It is the biological equivalent of the shroom.
Yep.
That actually makes sense to me. I mean, I'm on some weird drug that's supposed to suck the testosterone out of my system, and I certainly notice how it affects my relationships to people. It definitely sort of dampens that kind of reaching out. It doesn't kill it off completely, but it definitely dampens it. So Bill, yeah, I certainly see the effects of the physiology of the meat body having an effect on this.
Yes. And you have to remember that everything that you have is stored in your body. You ain't got no place else to keep it. And one of the things about this, when this state gets really profound, like I was talking about, it begins to release some of the rigid patterns that are in the body.
Okay, what is it? Now that's fascinating. Why does it do that? Is it because, I mean, usually it does it because the body becomes in motion, right? And just the movements of that tend to.
I think the chemical cascades overwhelm certain things. That's kind of my experience. It's there's an artificial way I know to produce this that I learned from a friend, and it has to do with getting into second wind. And what he would have you do is think of something that you're upset about, and really get into the experience of being utterly and totally upset about it, all of the emotions, and then work to second wind, which is not easy. And by the point you hit second wind, whatever that was, all of the energy to it is gone.
So that's working out until what?
Working out till you have gone beyond the level of respiratory distress that your body can sustain, and your body does something weird. Dr. Bill can probably, that doctor in front of the Dr. Bill is a real medical doctor thing, so maybe you can say more about physiologically what happens with that, but I know psychologically,
It's one of those really oddball things that, since we really cannot ethically test human beings to destruction, there's a lot we don't know about the phenomenon. But from the inside, it really is second wind. The only problem I have with second wind is that it really is innocuous.
yeah.
It's more like, I can't, oh God, I'm going to crump. Oh, I got this.
Yeah.
And you have to drive to about the point where it is the will to move, but you really think you're not gonna move, and then everything lets go and you get some extra energy. Now, the problem with that in turn is that if you haven't done a lot of training, second wind can lead to a collapse shortly afterwards.
Yep.
Which has some interesting implications from an evolutionary standpoint, which I'm not prepared to sort out because we simply don't know enough. But one of the reasons you want to do aggressive aerobic training, if you're going to be in bad places, is so that when the second wind hits, you don't collapse 20 movements later.
Yeah, so I think that
So this ties into the experience of the chemical cascade.
yes, and you can get a
By
similar
way
chemical
of-
cascade. So you can get a similar chemical cascade.
Yeah, this week's metaphor, because I keep looking for better ones, this week's non-dualist metaphor for the mind-body problem is that this is an instrument. And this is the instrument on which I play the song that you experience as me. Or that the song is played that I observe. Because again, you know, that gets twitchy. And it shouldn't be a surprise that at certain times, certain chemicals are making the keys a little sticky. Yeah, the tempo is going to be funny, or you're going to flat a note when it should be sharp. The question that the medieval scholastics used to wrestle with, what do you do with drunkenness, really isn't a question if I am accurate and the mind-body thing is a false dichotomy. You know, it's predictable that this instrument, if there's rust on the keys, will play differently. If you've left some water in the pipes, there's going to be some weird bubbles coming up.
It's true. So, quick check. Any last questions? Because I'm cognizant of the time, because we are all over the world, and some of you, it's god awful late.
One question.
Yes.
This universal empathy and connection, how does it play out between people who have it and sociopaths?
It can be very dangerous, because you can get sucked in by a sociopath. If you have empathy and they know how to play on your empathy, it can become dangerous. I found, though, that I am usually pretty good at spotting narcissists and sociopaths and psychopaths at a pretty reasonable rate. Not every time, but yeah, it's a problem. So I guess the answer is I don't have the best answer for you.
Okay.
Something
Zainab,
else.
you've been very quiet.
It's a very nice, interesting topic.
Yeah.
Listening.
Yes.
Yes.
Dave, any thoughts? I'm gonna call on people now.
Yeah, calling people. Do a little name calling. Dave and David.
I know David's having some trouble with his connections.
Yeah, he's having terrible trouble with his connections.
Asking a lot to have him chime in.
Yes.
But Mr. Keem, you're here. You're paying attention. Any thoughts that came to your mind during the talk today? No? All right. Okay, Dave says, I am more interested by the answers that came. Right on schedule and related to signs from the last 415 days. No questions this time.
Good. All right, then. Let's wrap this up for the night and say goodbye. Kyle, hang on for just a second before you take off.
Thanks to everyone for taking the time to be here, as always.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good night, folks.
Take
Yeah.
care.